Hello, good evening, our holy sisters and brothers.
Welcome to AT Daily on this beautiful Tuesday night.
Is it Tuesday?
No.
I've lost track of the days. It is Tuesday, right?
Yes.
It is Tuesday. Welcome, everybody. It's so great to have you with us. We've got a really fun page tonight. Let's light up the darkness.
Let's do it. Oh, can I do it this time?
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, who's going to be with us as we get it going on a great Tuesday night? Yehudit Sobel from Florence, South Carolina, Stephen from Dover, New Hampshire, and from Merced, Melissa from Great Neck. John from Sedona, Chaim says Charlotte is in the house.
I love all you guys. These are all names of regulars that we see every day, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, they sure are. Lucy from Minnesota, Miriam from Hayden, Colorado, Renee from Indy, and James from Indy. Matt Milner here from Eau Claire, who hung up his mezuzah that he received from my zuzah after hearing about it on our show. Shkoyach. May you be strengthened to perform many more mitzvahs, and mezuzah is a big one. Christo Cheney with us from Lubbock. Angela from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Welcome, Angela. John says, love you guys. We love you.
We love you, John.
Bill says, shalom. I admit that when I saw the title of this episode, I immediately thought, if you give a mouse some matzah. I should have called it that. That's good. Guy with us from Dayton, Matt laughed and says, I did a little while ago. I think you might be talking about donating. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Sharon says, Mike the AT Canine, and I wish you a Lila Tov from Lebanon, New Jersey.
The AT Canine.
Sheila from Montana. Christo, glad to be with us. George from Chicago. The names are coming in fast. Boltuma is with us from Ethiopia. Wow, Boltuma, this really is a worldwide base midrash, a worldwide class for learning ancient Jewish wisdom that's relevant today. Paula from Chicago. Yehudit is glad to see you, Nina. Patrice says, I'm not sure what that says.
St. George.
Oh, from St. George.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
Very good. Nancy is with us from Southern Pines. And that's right, Patrice, thank you for rewriting it. And Heriberto says, amen. Over there on the YouTube side, Deborah is with us saying shalom, and Marjorie with us from Tucker, Georgia. Welcome, everybody. You may have heard, you may have noticed, we sent out the email, we put it on Facebook, we're going to keep posting it. It's December 1st. We are finally launching our annual campaign.
Our long-delayed fundraiser that was supposed to be originally in March, and then the worldwide pandemic hit, and so we've put it off, and now we're doing it.
And now we're doing it, and this is your opportunity to partner with us. As you all know, I mean, this class, all the posts, Nina's Thursday Heroes, the holiday post, the Torah post, AT Daily, the Table for Five with a weekly commentary by 5 writers. So much Torah we put out. It's huge impact. Over 1 million souls around the world are getting touched by it. It costs money to fund operations, and that's great because it's your opportunity to be our Zevulon Issachar partners.
And many of you, thank you so much to all of you who have already donated. And if you haven't donated, please do. We've got the link in the comments, and you can come to our campaign page and see our very cool new reel video, highlight reel video.
Yes, that video will make your heart race a little bit when you see how much we accomplish here and where every dollar that comes into our nonprofit goes. When I say Zevulon, Issachar, those were 2 sons of Jacob, 2 of the 12 tribes, and they had a lifelong partnership. One would study and teach Torah. The other one was a merchant who did very well. And because they were partners, they both had equal merit for all the Torah that was shared in their world.
We live in very uncertain times, but there's one thing you can rely on, and that's that Sal will be teaching Talmud and lighting up the darkness every day. You know, there's been nobody in thousands of years of Jewish history who has made the Talmud accessible the way Sal does. I mean, you guys know, this is dense and deep material. This isn't easy to present to a wide and diverse audience. For up till now in Jewish history, it's really just been studied by very religious, very well-educated Jewish men. And I think you've partly been inspired by Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz of blessed memory in democratizing the Talmud. It's for everybody and has wisdom for living and wisdom about how to think and how to argue that's relevant to all people. And Sal works really, really hard at it. So he spends 3 to 4 days every single day.
Hours.
I'm sorry. He spends 3 to 4 hours every day of the week on AT Daily. Because first of all, he reads the daf and that takes an hour. Then he prepares the show, that takes an hour. Then he teaches the class, that takes an hour. And then he synopsizes it and posts it at the various places, that takes about another half an hour. So he does it and he loves it, and we both absolutely love what we're doing. We are so honored to be sharing Jewish wisdom with every single one of you. And you bless us by your presence, by your joyful participation and conversation and support of each other and of us. So thank you.
And I must say that Nina works just as hard. I mean, this is a total 50-50, 100% partnership between the two of us. When I'm teaching, she's in there monitoring comments, giving me notes, often at the same time that we've got 2 teenagers in the house. And, teenagers can be demanding. We love our kids. They're so wonderful, but all teenagers are somewhat demanding. And Nina's balancing all these things at the same time. Making dinner often during the show.
Daily is exactly at the time that I'm making dinner. But it's great. It's all good.
And plus, she writes those hero stories every week, which are pretty much our most popular content. And I think she's already written a book. I mean, she's just got to publish it. But it's an extraordinary collection of stories of often unsung heroes that, the world is finding out about through Nina's work. It's amazing.
We have very good ones coming up this week. It's actually a husband and wife hero couple.
Oh, I'm looking forward to read that.
Yes. So enough about us.
Enough about us. So
let's get to the Talmud
donate.
study.
So donate.
That's the message. I think you've gotten the message.
And the link is right there in the comments. Okay, Nina, you're gonna be monitoring like you always do.
Love you guys.
All right. We'll try not to be boring with the pitching, but we got to make our budget by during this campaign in December so that we have what to fund our operations with for the coming year in 2021. Okay, today's class. And there's going to be a lot of these dedications because people are donating. We're going to space them out over time. So we have 2 dedications tonight. Diane Yaris is dedicating our class for the speedy recovery of Malka Nina Bas Rivka. May she have a refuah shlema, a complete recovery of mind, body, spirit, and may it be speedy. And Sharon Savage is dedicating an episode of AT Daily, this episode of AT Daily, well, to us, to Nina and me. She's saying, thank you for tirelessly lighting up the darkness by spreading the Torah and Jewish wisdom to the ends of the earth. I hope that you both will be strengthened and blessed with resources to continue in this noble effort. May you and your family be blessed. Thank you so much, Sharon, and may you and your family be blessed in the merit of contributing to this effort of sharing Torah with the world. All right, we've got a super fun daf today. I was going to play this song. I didn't find one in time, but people who are familiar with the song Chad Gad Yah from Passover, it's sort of like a fun and almost mathematical song. A little bit similar to, I grew up in America. I may be Jewish, but I've heard that song, The 12 Days of Christmas, and My True Love Gave to Me, etc. All these songs where each day the numbers, increase, and then the Chad Gad Yah is about the goat that my father bought for 2 zuzim, and along the way there's the goat gets eaten and attacked, and the one who ate gets attacked by this one, and then the fire puts out, and the water puts out the fire, and it's one of these causal linkages. That's a kind of fun, sort of the kind of song that people who enjoy puzzles would enjoy the song. And so today it's going to be that kind of a day. We're going to have some fun, almost, what do you call it? Brain teasers, right? That the rabbis are going to ask. And with these playful puzzles, what they're really challenging themselves and us, the reader of the Mishna and the Gemara, is, well, they're being playful with it, But the question is, do we understand the law well enough to get inside these challenging type of questions? They might not be realistic, might not be from the real world. As we've seen many times, the Talmud is not so often interested in the real world in terms of positing its crazy hypothetical cases. But when we get inside those cases, we realize that our knowledge falls short of understanding exactly what is at stake and what is the principle that we need to apply to the question. So let's get into it. There's going to be a series of cases. Recall we're in, okay, so where are we? This is Daf Yud, page 10 in Tractate Pesachim, the fourth volume of the Talmud. We're studying the laws of Passover. We're in chapter 1. Today we're completing our discussion of Mishnah number 2 and opening our discussion of the third Mishnah of chapter 10. So we already know that on the 14th of the Hebrew month of Nisan, we search our houses for chametz, for leavened bread, leavened products. We don't remove them from the house. We don't burn them or remove them or sell them. On the night of the 14th, we wait until midday, the next day, which is still the 14th on the Hebrew calendar, because that afternoon is when the temple was standing, we would slaughter the Paschal offering. And during that period, when the offering is being slaughtered, there can no longer be leaven, chametz, leavened bread, leavened products in the possession of any Jew. It would be prohibited. So we got to get rid of it by then. So that's the background of these questions. First case, the house has been searched, right? So the house has been searched. We've established that there is no more chametz scattered around the house. Any chametz that's left, because we haven't gotten rid of it yet, we haven't removed it yet, but we've contained it all in a sealed and concealed place. As we saw yesterday, so those cute little martens, that furry little sleek and quick mammal, a marten, wouldn't get in, find some of the bread, drag it away into its lair, and leave some crumbs behind. If we saw a marten do that, we'd have to search the house again, because now we couldn't be sure that some crumbs hadn't been left behind by the receding marten, as it were. So the house has been searched. We're confident that any leaven that's still in it is in a sealed and concealed place where the animals won't get at it. And then this happens. Outside, so not inside a house, but outside, there's a pile of chametz. So maybe people did the spring cleaning. They were only going to leave a limited amount of chametz in the house because we're still allowed to eat it on the morning of the 14th. But what they've removed is waiting out there in a pile where it's going to get burned at midday on the 14th. But in that pile of chametz that's outside the house, we witness that a mouse goes in and takes a piece of chametz, and then he scurries off. And where's he going? Well, where do mice live? Mice live in houses. So he's going to go into the house that's already been searched. But the problem is there's two houses. So there's two houses. They've already been searched. They were searched on the night of the 14th. Now it's the morning of the 14th, the next morning. The chametz is outside. A mouse grabs some and scurries back to its lair inside the house. And the real problem is we don't know which house the mouse entered. Right? So now where are we? Do we presume that since that mouse might have entered either one of the houses, that therefore both houses need to be searched? Or since we didn't see the mouse enter a house, do we think, well, we don't know for sure that it entered the house. Maybe it went somewhere else. Maybe it went into its lair in the wall, but it never went in the house. So we're not going to find anything. How do we handle this situation? And the Gemara tells us that this conundrum, as it were, is similar to a situation, and this is what's going to happen in all these cases, that rabbis are going to look to another body of law to help them handle this case of uncertainty. These cases are all about uncertainty. And actually, it's going to get quite interesting how we're going to handle uncertainty. It made me think right away about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, right? That in quantum physics, you can't be sure that if you know the location of a particle, you can't tell, which direction and how fast it's moving. Or if you know its momentum, which way it's going, then you don't know where it is, right? So there's just this inherent uncertainty to particles. And as we're going to see, it gets quite interesting how that applies here. So the case from which we're going to borrow legal principles, as it were, is that there were two paths. Okay, so there are two paths to get to a certain place. And we know that under one of those paths, there's a grave, an unmarked grave. We don't know where it is, but it's under a path. But the problem is there's two paths and only one of them has this grave under it. So if you take that path, you walk over this grave, and now you become tameh, ritually impure. At the end of the two paths where these two people are going, they handle some teruma. So teruma is a tithe of food that's set apart for the priests, and it must be in a state of tahara, of ritual purity, or the priests won't be able to eat it. So if a person walks over a grave and he becomes tameh, ritually impure, and then he handles some of this grain, this food product that was set aside for the priest, he renders the teruma, this tithe, this food product, impure, and now the priest can't eat it. It's like it's ruined. It was set aside for the priest, but now the priest can't eat it. The problem is, both of them handled the teruma at the end of their journey. One of them is certainly tameh. We know that there is a grave under one of the two paths, but we don't know which. So for sure, if they both handled the same teruma, that teruma ended up being tameh, because one of them is tameh, one of them is ritually impure, but they don't both handle the same teruma. They both get to the end of their path and handle teruma, but it's not the same teruma. Okay, so one of them rendered the teruma that they touched tameh, ritually impure, but we don't know which. Now this gets fascinating. So if one of them, he goes to a sage for a ruling, and he says, I walked over this path. There were two paths. One of them makes people tameh, ritually impure, when they walk over it. The other one doesn't. I don't know if my path is the one with the grave under it. So, and then I touch teruma. Have I rendered the teruma invalid so that it's no longer good for the priest because it's impure? And the sage will say, no, you and the teruma are pure because of this uncertainty. And then if the other guy comes and asks the same sage, I walked over one path. I know that one of the two paths has a grave under it. And then I handled teruma, and I didn't take the same path as that other guy. Am I tameh? And the answer is no. You're pure also, and the teruma that you handled is pure. So if the two guys who we know one of them is impure, but if they come they come separately to ask the sage whether they've been rendered impure due to uncertainty, the answer is no to both of them. However, if they come together, and so both of them are standing before the sage, and we know one of them has to be impure because one of the two paths is impure, and they took, both paths were taken by the two guys, then now they are both impure, right? So if they come sequentially, neither of them is impure. If they come together, both are impure. In both cases, due to the uncertainty. What is this based on? It's based on a presumptive status remains until we have a reason to change it, right? So both of these guys were pure. They were in a state of tahara before they took their walk on the path. And then one of them walked over a grave, but we don't know which. And vis-a-vis each one, we don't have any definitive reason to believe that guy became impure. So we leave his status as it was. But when both of them come together, then we know that one of them became impure. We don't know which. So now we have to say, because of the uncertainty, both are impure, and the teruma that each of them touched is going to be rendered impure. Rabbi Yehuda says, because there's an interesting disagreement here. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says if they come one after the other separately, they're both pure. If they come together, they're both impure. Rabbi Yosei says they're both impure no matter what. Rava said, and some say it was Rabbi Yochanan said, that what was actually the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosei is they both agree that if the two men come separately to get a ruling, then both of them remain pure. If they come together, then for sure one of them is impure, and therefore both of them have to be rendered impure because of the uncertainty. Where they disagree is if only one of them goes to the sage and asks for a ruling regarding both of them. In that case, Rabbi Yehuda says this is equivalent to them coming separately, and Rabbi Yosei says when one come to ask about both of them, this is equivalent to them coming together. And so then the question would be, well, what does that tell us about the mouse who enters one of the two houses and we're not sure which? The Gemara doesn't answer that, but it says that we learn out the law from this case, and it would seem to say that because, in terms of walking over impurity, the impurity of a corpse that's in a grave, that's a Torah law. But the requirement to search on the 14th or to search again, that's a rabbinic law. So we're always going to be more lenient with respect to rabbinic laws. And it would appear that we're going to rule at least the way, the lenient side of that ruling. We know the mouse took it somewhere. We don't know which. So each house has to remain in its presumptive state that it was searched and doesn't need to be searched again. Second case, we saw the mouse take leaven from the pile of chametz. There's only one house. We're not sure if it entered the house or not. Must we search again? Before there were two houses, right? So we had a reason to believe that the mouse went into a house, but we don't know which. So it's a double uncertainty. Did it enter at all? If it entered, which one of the houses? Now there's only one house, right? So now there's only one house. If it entered a house, it went into this house. Do we need to search the house again? It was already searched. The mouse went in with some chametz, might have gone in with some chametz. We're not sure. What we know is that the mouse took some chametz from the pile, and we're not sure if he entered the house or not. So the Gemara says, this case, the law here can be learned out not from the case of two paths, but from the case of the valley. Okay, so there was a valley, and in the valley, there are different fields. One of the fields has a grave under it, and we're not sure where that grave is in the field, and the other fields don't. So if a person walked through the valley, the question is, did he walk through one of the fields that has a grave under it? If so, he would be rendered tameh, ritually impure. If not, he's still tahor. He's ritually pure. He walked through the valley. Now, interesting, in the rainy season, this is like John Candy and Stripes. In the rainy season, it's going to be a different outcome than not in the rainy season. Why? Because during the rainy season, the crops are just beginning to sprout. If you walk through somebody's field, you would do damage. People are more particular about where they walk. So interestingly, you would think that would mean, oh, well, then nobody walked through a field in an unmarked grave because they're going to stay on the paths. But the outcome is actually the opposite. When it's the rainy season and you walk through a valley, the whole valley is considered to be like a private domain. And when there's an unmarked grave or some source of ritual impurity in a private domain, then whether or not you walked over it, the fact that it's in the private domain and you walk through the private domain, you're going to be rendered impure due to this uncertainty. Again, ritual impurity imparted from a corpse is a matter of Torah law, and so we're going to be more stringent in those cases. But if it's not the rainy season, so now you have this doubt, did I walk over the field or did I not walk over the field? And Rabbi Eliezer is going to say, hold on a second. So Rabbi Eliezer says, he's not sure if he walked through the field, he's going to be pure. The rabbis are going to say, well, you might have walked through the field. You're not sure. We're going to make you impure. We're going to say that you're tameh. Again, there's a doubt that you might have walked through the field that has tumah in it. If the person says, I'm not sure whether I came into contact with impurity or not, So now it would seem like, well, he knows you walked through a field that had impurity in it. He's just not sure if he walked over the unmarked grave itself or not. The first case, there's a compound uncertainty. Did you walk through a field that had a grave in it? And if you did you step over the grave itself? But if you know you walked through the field and you're just not sure if you stepped on the grave, that's just one source of uncertainty. And there, Rabbi Eliezer would agree with the rabbis that this person is going to be rendered tameh, ritually impure, due to doubt. Okay, and so with respect to the leaven, how does this apply, right? Where there's only one house and we're not sure whether he went in or out, why is this being compared to the case of one who walked through a valley where there's two levels of uncertainty? Did he walk through a field that had a grave in it? Did he step over the grave? Here we know the mouse took the chametz. All we don't know is whether he entered the house or not. But what the rabbis are teaching us again is this idea of rabbinic decree versus Torah law. In the case of rabbinic decree, where there's only one source of uncertainty, it's going to be treated like two sources of uncertainty. And at least according to Rabbi Eliezer, he would be pure. And in this case, we would assume that according to Rabbi Eliezer, we would not have to search the house again because this is just a rabbinic case. But according to the rabbis, where even with the double uncertainty, they would say, yeah, you're going to be rendered impure. And with respect to the mouse, there's only one source of uncertainty. Did he enter the house or not? But according to the rabbis, that's going to be close enough. And we're going to say, yeah, you need to search the house again. Third case, we saw a mouse enter the house. The house had already been searched. We saw the mouse take some chametz and enter the house. Then we went in the house and we searched again because we saw the mouse enter the house. We do another search and we don't find anything. So now what? Have we satisfied our obligation? Right? We agree that if we saw the mouse take chametz and we saw the mouse enter this house and the house had already been searched, but now a mouse brought chametz back into the house, so we have to search it again. But we don't find anything when we search again. What do we need to do then? Again, this is going to be compared to a case of corpse tuma, corpse impurity. Rabbi Meir says if there's a field and you know that there's a grave in that field, but you don't know where it is, you need to keep searching that field until you discover the grave. And if you don't discover the grave, that field, the whole field, is going to be deemed a source of tuma, of ritual impurity, forever until the grave is found. And if the grave is never found, then that field, anybody who sets foot in that field is going to be considered tameh, that he has become ritually impure. But the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Meir, and they say we're going to be reasonable, right? After all, we're reasonable people here. And the rabbis say they search the field for the grave. If they don't find it, but they reach bedrock or virgin soil, meaning they reach a status where they know that, there's no possibility there's a grave here, then that's good enough. They don't have to keep searching. Rabbi Meir would say, if you know there's a grave there, but you don't find it, it's because somehow your search was deficient. The rabbis say, you conduct a reasonable search, you don't find anything, now you can say that field is considered tahor, ritually pure again. So with this mouse who brought chametz back into a house that had already been searched, excuse me, let me take a drink of water. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam shach, kol nihudi v'ro. You search the house after you saw the mouse bring chametz back into it. You don't find any crumbs. Presumably, so according to the rabbis, if you do a good enough search, okay, so you did your job. You're not going to say that this house needs to be searched and searched and searched and searched, and it's going to be deemed a house, that can't be sort of, considered chametz free when Passover begins, which is sort of where Rabbi Meir would leave us. But the law is like the rabbis who say you search for the grave in the field, you do the best search you can, you don't find it, okay, good enough, we're done. We search and then we desist searching. The fourth case, we saw a mouse enter a house that had already been searched. The mouse is carrying some chametz. We go in, we do another search, and we find the crumbs. We find crumbs. The question is, are these the crumbs that the mouse brought in, or are they other crumbs? Maybe there's a second mouse. Are we satisfied if we found crumbs that these are the crumbs of the mouse who brought chametz back into the house? This is going to be likened to the case of a field where you know there's a grave, and then they search the field and they find the grave. So you would think, okay, well, we know there's a grave in that field. During the war, somebody told us a soldier was buried there. We went, years later, because it was told that, a soldier was buried there during a war. We searched through the field. We find the unmarked grave of that soldier. We remove the remains, put them in a proper cemetery. And so can we now say that field is tahor, that people who walk through that field are no longer going to be considered tameh because they walked over a grave that we're not sure where in the field it is? Answer, the rabbis will say, yes, you search, you know there's a grave there, you find the grave, you're good. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel would say, how do you know that the grave you found is the only grave in that field? After all, if there were soldiers in a war, there might have been more than one that died there. You still need to search the whole field to make sure that there's not a second grave. Likewise, mouse goes in, you search the house, a mouse drags chametz into the house, you go in, you find some crumbs. The Rebbe says, you can't tell. Wait a minute, I'm sorry. That's a different case. Searching, we might find the other. In the case of leaven, it's like the rabbis. In other words, if you see a mouse bringing chametz, you go in, you search, you find crumbs, you can assume that those are the crumbs left there by that mouse, and now your search is complete. You don't have to keep searching. Next case, you did your search on the night of the 14th of Nisan, and then you leave 10 crumbs. Right? Or you leave 10 crumbs. Right? Why do we leave 10 crumbs? This is still something that we do today. You leave 10 little pieces of chametz. Really what happens is, let me get this right. The way we do this now is we do the big spring cleaning prior to the 14th of Nisan. And then when we do that search, really the house has already been emptied. We shouldn't find anything. But to make sure we find something, we will strategically place, kind of wrapped and sealed a few pieces of chametz, usually 10, so that we can find them. So now, actually, this is a little bit different. It's not that. It's that you already searched the house. You search the house. You find, let's say, these 10 pieces. For some reason, they're saying 9 pieces. And you place them in a sealed container in the kitchen, because you can still have leaven there the next morning. You're not going to remove and burn it until midday on the 14th. So for some reason they're saying 9, it could have been 10, in a specific place in the kitchen. So then you come in the next day, to take your 10 pieces and remove them for burning at midday. But instead of finding 10 pieces, you find 11. Or as the Gemara says, instead of finding 9 pieces, you find 10. You find more in the location where you were storing the chametz, the sealed location, than you left there. Now, the rabbis will liken this case to a person that sets aside Meiser Sheni, second tithe money, right? This is money that has a sacred status. It can't be used for regular household expenses. The second tithe has to be used when you make a pilgrimage up to Jerusalem during the festivals for your needs during the pilgrimage, right? It's holy money. It can only be used for the needs of that holy pilgrimage to Jerusalem for Passover, Shavuos, or Sukkot, when the temple is standing in Jerusalem. So you have this money set aside, and let's say it's quite a bit of money, 100 dinars. That's a sizable amount of money. And you had set that aside for when you go to Jerusalem, you're going to spend that. So then, you go about your business. It's time to go up for the festival. You go to that special box where you kept that money. And instead of finding 100 dinars, you find 200 dinars. Now, what's in that box? You put 100 dinars of holy money in it. Now there's 200. Is it holy money? Is it not holy money? Is it holy money intermingled with not holy money? What is the case? What do we have there? In that situation, Rebbe says this is mixed. We don't know what it is, right? It would seem to be holy money mixed with unholy money. We don't know how the non-holy money got in there. We have no reason to assume that it is holy. So now we've got this problem of intermingled money. We're not going to go into what you do with intermingled money, but you've got the problem of intermingled money. Half of it can only be used for holy purposes. The other half is not holy, but they're intermingled. It's a problem. The rabbis disagree with Rebbe's ruling in that situation, and they say actually all the money is non-holy. You left 100 dinars of holy money, right? Meiser Sheni, tithe money set aside for the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Now there's 200 dinars there. More money came in here. Why should we assume that it was non-holy money mixed with holy money? The fact is there's different money here. And so the rabbis will say in this case of uncertainty, we're going to be lenient and say that this whole money is non-sacred. You don't have your holy money. You lost your holy money. The money that's here is non-holy money. You can use it for whatever you want, but you don't have your Meiser Sheni, and you're going to have to deal with that situation. So likewise, in the case of the leaven, you put 9 crumbs, or let's say 9 crumbs in the sealed spot. You found 10. You have no reason to assume that the extra crumb is the only new crumb that's been introduced into your house that was emptied of all chametz. You're going to have to search again. Next case, you see a mouse. This is a mouse, like Mighty Mouse, because this mouse has a whole loaf of bread in its jaws. Now, loaves in ancient times, not necessarily like big loaf like this. Think more like a dinner roll, but still, mice are really small. So this mouse has a whole dinner roll, a small loaf of bread in its mouth, and you see it run into the house. Oh, terrible, right? Big problem. So now you go in the house and you find crumbs. So what is your assumption? What can you assume? Did the mouse either eat the whole loaf or stash the loaf somewhere that you're not going to find, and these crumbs are all that's left, and when you pick up those crumbs, you're done with your second, your new search of the house? Or do you have to go search the house again? And then this is compared to, now you see a child run into the house carrying a loaf of bread. You know you have to search again. You find some crumbs. Did you find all that's left of when the young child took the loaf back into the house that had already been searched? And the answer is, it is not in the nature of a mouse to leave crumbs behind, right? Mice are very greedy. They come in and pick up the crumbs. They eat crumbs, right? They're not going to leave crumbs behind. So even though it had a whole loaf, or because it had a whole loaf, and all you find is crumbs, those crumbs tell you that, okay, well, you found those crumbs, but there's probably more crumbs elsewhere because this mouse entered the house with a whole loaf. So you have to continue search. You have to do a whole search again. Search out the whole house again. But if a child entered the house carrying a loaf of bread, and then you come in and only find some crumbs, then those crumbs are all you need to worry about, because while it is not in the nature of a mouse to leave crumbs behind, it is definitely in the nature of a young child to leave crumbs around the house. Anybody who's ever been a child or had a child in the house knows that children leave crumbs behind. So now you might say, well, if the child ran into the house with a loaf of bread and we found some crumbs, isn't it likely that he moved around the house and left more crumbs? But apparently not. The crumbs that you see, those are the ones that you can make an assumption that those are the crumbs that the child left behind after he ate the loaf. But the crumbs you see left behind when the mouse ran in with a loaf, you're going to have to check it again. Very good. Number 7 that we are discussing, there's more than 7 cases, but the one that we are discussing here is very playful, and so I'm going to read it to you because it's kind of cute. So this is, now we're really going to push, this idea of, well, what do we have to do in the face of uncertainty? I see Beverly Arnold commented, funny. I find this one quite funny. Although the rulings in these cases were clear to Rava, All right, so Rav, I think everything that we've done so far, he would say, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Rava raised a dilemma with regard to a related case. So now he's going to make it a little bit tougher, really test our knowledge of these assumptions with regard to uncertainty and how we resolve these uncertainties. Now he's going to challenge us. He says, well, if one saw a mouse enter with a loaf of bread in its mouth, and he saw a mouse leave with a loaf in its mouth, what is the law? Now you would think, the mouse entered the house with a loaf of bread in its mouth, and then he left the house with a loaf of bread in its mouth. It's not the nature of a mouse to leave crumbs behind. You would think, we're done, right? We don't have to go search the house again. It's already been searched, and the mouse with the loaf went in, and the mouse with the loaf went out. But do we say that this mouse that entered is the same mouse that left, and there is no more leaven in the house? Or perhaps there's a different mouse. We can't be sure that the mouse that left with a loaf is the same mouse that entered with a loaf. And if you say that this mouse that entered was the one that left, another dilemma arises. Let's say we saw a white mouse enter with a loaf of bread in its mouth and a black mouse leave with a loaf of bread in its mouth. Well, what is the law then? Do I say that this is certainly a different mouse? Or perhaps the black mouse took the loaf from the white mouse? Right? So if a white mouse entered with a loaf and a black mouse emerged with a loaf, do we say that's the same loaf of bread? Or maybe the white mouse entered with a loaf of bread. Who knows where he is and where he stashed it and what crumbs he left behind. And a black mouse found a different loaf of bread somewhere and emerged with that. We can't assume it's the same loaf of bread that went from one mouse to another. And if you say that the mice do not take from each other, so therefore, right, there's a loaf of bread still in the house, and the one that came out, he brought a different loaf. So then you would think we need to search, as one mouse is generally not significantly stronger than another. Well, if one saw a mouse enter with a loaf of bread in its mouth, and a marten, that cute little mammal, but to a mouse, very scary, huge mammal. A marten may only be about this big, but to a mouse, that's a big predator. So if one saw a mouse enter with a loaf of bread in its mouth and a marten leave with a loaf of bread in its mouth, what is the law then? Do I say that the marten certainly took it from the mouse as it is larger and stronger? Or perhaps it is a different loaf, or if it is so that the marten took the loaf from the mouse itself should also be in the mouth of the marten, because martens would prefer to eat a mouse than a loaf of bread any time. So if he's taking the loaf, he'd certainly bring the mouse too. The mouse is the better piece of, the loaf is only the side dish for the marten. The mouse would be the main course. And if you say that we accept the contention that if it is so, that if the marten took it from the mouse itself would be in its mouth. In regard to a case where one saw a mouse enter with a loaf of bread in its mouth and a marten leave with both a loaf of bread and a mouse in its mouth, what is the law then? Do I say that this is certainly the same mouse and loaf? Or perhaps even this conclusion can be disputed. If it is so that this is the same mouse, the loaf would have been found in the mouse's mouth rather than in the marten's mouth. Consequently, this must be a different loaf of bread. Or perhaps the loaf of bread fell from the mouse's mouth due to its fear, and the marten took it separately. No satisfactory answer can be found for these dilemmas, and the Gemara concludes, Teku, let it stand. So that was a long-winded way of saying we can't make assumptions just because it's the simplest answer, right? Occam's razor is an ancient principle. It's his fellow William of Ockham. I think that was his name, William of Ockham, in the 13th century. And he actually got this principle from Maimonides, from the Rambam. That Occam's razor says that the simplest answer is probably right. Maybe it is probably right, but it doesn't mean that it's right. And we always need to test our assumptions, because even though there's a simple logical explanation about how one mouse went in and another mouse came out, and they're the same color, it must be the same mouse, we don't know what happened in the house. Did the mouse drop its loaf and find another? Did the mouse get attacked by the marten? We don't know, right? And if you watch mystery movies, right? So certainly whoever seems to be the likeliest suspect turns out not to be the actual killer, right? And that's not just movies, right? This lawyer, Barry Scheck, who founded the Innocence Project, has pulled a number of people off death row who were convicted because the evidence seemed pretty clear, right, beyond a reasonable doubt that this was the killer, but then later DNA evidence became available, and in fact, the person was innocent. So this idea of challenging our assumptions, particularly when the assumptions are based on good logic, but not necessarily, smoking gun type of evidence, is something that we really want to be aware of in this world. And finally, I'm coming to your questions now, but the last thing I'll do is just open our discussion of Mishnah number 3, because it's toward the end of our daf, page 10, here in Tractate Pesachim. So Mishnah number 3. Rabbi Yehuda says, one searches for leaven on the evening of the 14th of Nisan, and on the 14th in the morning, and at the time of removal, right? So the night of the 14th, then the next morning, the morning of the 14th, and then at midday, the time when we remove the chametz, the leaven, and burn it or sell it or just get it out of the Jews' possession. So Rabbi Yehuda seems to be saying that one searches the night of the 14th, the morning of the 14th, and at midday of the 14th. And the rabbis say that is not the case. If one did not search on the evening of the 14th, he should search on the 14th during the day. And if he did not search on the 14th during the day, he should search during the festival of Passover. And if he did not search during the festival, he should even search after the festival. Now that's a surprise, right? Because he's saying you should search out your house to make sure there's no leaven in it on the 14th, right? That's what we've been learning so far before Passover begins. And now the rabbis are saying, well, even if you didn't search on the 14th and the festival began on the 15th and you didn't have a chance to search for some reason, so then you search during the festival. And now they're further saying that if you didn't have the chance to search during the whole 7 days of Passover, 8 days outside of Israel, then after Passover ends, when leaven is permitted again, you still have to go in and search and get rid of it. Why? Because leaven, chametz, that you possessed, that a Jew possessed during Passover, was prohibited then, and it remains prohibited. Something that was prohibited to be possessed by a Jew during Passover remains prohibited, right? That's why if you sell your chametz, that's something else. Then it wasn't in your possession. But if you owned it, you possessed it, it was on your premises and you didn't deal with it, then even though the festival has passed, the rabbis are saying you should go search it and get rid of it. As it says, as any leaven that remained in his possession during the festival is classified as leaven owned by a Jew during Passover, which one is obligated to remove. And the principle is, with regard to leaven that one leaves after the search, he should place it in a concealed location where it will most likely be left untouched, so that it will not require searching after it goes missing. As we talked about the case, once you've sealed it in the kitchen after your search, because you're going to remove it at midday on the 14th, you want it in a sealed place so that you don't see a mouse or a marten drag some away, cause you to have a certainty that the chametz got out of the sealed place where your chametz was being stored that morning, and lead you to need to search your house again. The Gemara is going to open by commenting, well, what's Rabbi Yehuda saying that you need to search on the night of the 14th and again on the morning and then again at midday? So do you really have to search 3 times? It's going to say that the source for why Rabbi Yehuda holds that you have to search 3 times is because it's mentioned 3 times in the Torah that you must not possess leaven in your homes. There's 3 verses at Exodus 13:7, 12:19, and 12:15. I won't read the verses because it's late. But there's 3 verses where God commands us, don't have leaven in your homes during the festival of matzahs. So it would seem that Rabbi Yehuda is calling for a search 3 times to parallel those 3 verses. And then, who is it that says so? Rav Chisda and Rav Bar Yehuda, they're the ones who derive the 3 searches from the 3 verses. But Rav Yosef says, no. That's not what Rav Yehuda is saying. What Rav Yehuda is saying is that you can search at any of those 3 times. You can search on the night of the 14th. You can search on the morning of the 14th. You can search at midday on the 14th at the time of removal. But if you didn't search during those times on the 14th, and then the festival of Passover begins, so you blew it. You missed your opportunity to search out your house. You can no longer fulfill the mitzvah, fulfill the obligation of searching out your house. But he's in the minority. The rabbis say you do search even after the festival has begun if you didn't search on the 14th, and you even search after the festival has ended. You can still fulfill that obligation. That's what I've got for us tonight. Let me check your comments and questions. John Shore. It was hard to hear Nina. Please move the mic closer next time. Thank you, John. So next time she's in here, we'll do something like that. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. And James says, let Nina have the mic. Okay. So we have to, maybe I'm a loudmouth. So when she's here visiting, we're both sitting here, I'll back up. She'll come closer. Thank you for the feedback. Appreciate that. Sharon says, with kashrut, there is a minimum amount of offending contents. For example, milk to soup with meat. It's like, in most cases, it's 1/60th. Otherwise, right, if you put milk, a little bit of milk spills into a beef stew, it's forbidden to mix milk and meat. But if it's such a small amount of milk, it would be nullified. But there are some things where even the smallest amount does not get nullified. Is the amount of chametz like a mouse carrying quantity that requires a second search? Is it an amount? It doesn't seem to be that way. This might be one of those strict liability things that any chametz is too much chametz. And that's why when we're talking about not only a loaf being carried by a mouse, but even a crumb being carried by a mouse, we got to do that search again if we know that the mouse entered the house. Lucy says, it seems that you can never be sure some critter did not bring some chametz in the house. Right, that was the second Mishnah. Where does it end? And that's why the rabbis are saying there's a limit to how much uncertainty we're going to deal with. And beyond that, it's too crazy because, as it said, ein ledavar sof, right? There's no end to the matter. What's the rest of your comment? Mice can hide in tiny spaces you can't find, and most often you do not see them, so you always have to live with some uncertainty and assume that things are okay. Exactly, and that's why you're going to do your best. After you've done this search, whatever chametz remains, it keeps using the word concealed in the Koran translation, and I'm saying sealed, but the idea is you want to put it somewhere where a mouse is least likely to get in it. Now, they probably didn't very often have metal bread boxes like we do, so they just did their best to seal it up. Lynn says, I assume the size of the field has maximum limits. Even how close a Kohen gets to a grave is measured. Everything gets measured. Right, so I guess I'm sure there's a limit to the size of the field that we're going to assume. We know there's a grave there, but how massive is the field? And we're going to say that anyone who walks through that field, I'm not aware of what the size limits are. It might be a question. It might depend on how well defined the field is. But it seems like we're talking about a karpef, but that's going to be for another time. We're not talking that much about tuma from a corpse. And Sharon jokes, small loaves or very large mice for the loaf that went back in the house. All right, we've run somewhat long. Thank you for learning with us. This was a fun one, trying to understand the limits of uncertainty, and Rava especially pushing the cases to challenge us to understand how far we're going to go and to test our own assumptions using these cases of the mice and the martins that go back in a house that's already been searched. We announced at the beginning, it's December 1st. We've opened our annual campaign where, we were raising funds so that we can fund operations at Accidental Talmudist for the coming year. We are a nonprofit. We rely on your donations. If you appreciate the learning and the teaching that we do, if you want to partner with us in bringing Torah and Jewish wisdom to the whole world, it's very holy work. It's a huge merit to all our partners, everybody who donates to allow this teaching to be possible. We have a lot of expenses from marketing, production costs, staff, admin, all kinds of stuff that we do. So this is the chance. The link is there in the comments. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. You partner with us. It's a huge merit for you in this world and in the next. All the best, my holy sisters and brothers.